Good afternoon and welcome. Let me begin by thanking Jeff, not only for his presentation, but also for taking his time to travel here to join us this afternoon. The diesel engine and the coalition have very compelling stories, and you did a very good job of presenting it this afternoon. So we as SinterCast stakeholders, we know that while we sit at home here in Europe, we're in good hands while you're off tilting at windmills in Washington. So we wish you every success. You have no shortage of support from this audience. Right, let's talk about SinterCast. Great to be here this year after a strong year and standing on the strongest foundation that we've ever had. What I'd like to do today is to review the market development and then to finish up with an outlook for the rest of 2011. I think that the best way to review the market development is to look at the series production in terms of the graph that we first presented at last year's annual meeting and that we used in the annual report as well. And here we see the series production development over the last 5 years. And we're all familiar with the way it developed. In the early years, a stable production, primarily building from the V-diesel programs here in Europe. In 2007, starting to ramp up a little bit as the commercial vehicle programs came on stream, reaching our peak in September 2008. And from that point, a difficult year. The entire industry had a difficult year, and we followed that. But since the middle of 2009, 7 consecutive quarters of positive growth. And so we come here today, our production is up 75% compared to our previous peak, and up 55% compared to last year's annual meeting. So really very positive growth and things that we can all be pleased to have contributed to. One thing that I'd like to point out in this trend line is that our production is above the peak that we had before the onset of the downturn. And the downturn is now becoming history. And so I don't really want to dwell on that, but rather it gives us a very good point for our comparisons because that was our previous high. And when a lot of the OEMs are now presenting their production figures, they're presenting very positive growth in year on year. But that's in comparison to a low result last year. SinterCast isn't comparing to the low. We're presenting a 75% growth compared to our previous high, clearly outperforming the market. Yeah? Another thing that we have to look forward to here is that we start the year on a very high level. We have about 1.3 million engine equivalents in the first quarter report. We've always said in the past that we need about 1 million engine equivalents per year, plus an installation, to establish a break-even for cash flow. Now we're already running above our break-even volume. We have the Daedong installation from January and the Daishin that we announced earlier this week. So we're on that very stable and strong foundation that I referred to earlier. We can look at the development of the production both in terms of the programs that were in production before the previous peak and programs that started production since the peak. And here we see the volume of the older programs, if you will. And like much of the market, they had a decline for about a year and a half or a year and 3 quarters. But since that time, we've now started to have some recovery. We're not all the way back to where we were, about 20% below, but certainly moving in the right trend. Yeah? We can then look at the programs that started production after the onset of the downturn. And when we were together last year, the old and the new programs were just at a crossover point. And we see that the newer programs have continued to grow. And even though those newer programs are less than 50% of the components that we have in production, they now account for 60% of our production revenue. So those newer programs have had a very good growth and a good contribution. What I'd like to do now is to look out beyond the right edge of this plot and think about what will happen as we go forward. And obviously everything is trending in the right direction, so we can expect more growth. As we said in the interim report, first quarter report, our current volume is 1.3 million, and the mature volume for those 46 different components is about 1.55. So we can still expect some more growth, but we should also expect that it starts to flatten out a little bit because we are reaching the saturation. And how can we grow beyond the 1.55 million? Well, first, the market can recover, and we can get carried along with that, and that's very likely because the market is getting better. And the second way is that new programs come on stream. And I think we have a very good track record of rolling out a handful of programs or so every year. So we can expect that more programs will come and continue to carry that number upward. So if we look in more detail, what I'd like to do is to make reference to the 5 waves. And we first introduced the 5 waves at the AGM in 2002. And still is the most useful way to look at the development of the different production sectors. In 2002, we thought that the inline diesels, wave 3, would come before the V diesels outside of Europe, which principally meant North America. But as you know, we also have the V6 diesel engine produced for Hyundai in Korea. But that hasn't been the case. In fact, the inline diesels have taken a longer time to develop. And with the support and the indulgence of the shareholders, I'd like to make that right. And what I'd like to do is reorder so that it actually reflects the production that we have. And so if we then swap around the 3rd and the 4th waves, we can report in this way going forward. And the ambition then is to update the website during next week as well to reflect what's actually happening. You'll also note in this change that we changed from inline diesels in Europe in wave 4 just to call it now inline diesels. And the reason for this is, again, over the last 9 years the market has changed, and we now know that automakers, when they establish diesel engines, are likely to use them not only in Europe but abroad. And as Jeff said, the regulations in America are changing, and we're coming to the point where the engine used in Europe can equally be used in North America. So I think that the inline diesels, when they come, don't need to be just a European wave anymore. Yeah? So let's review them one by one. And the first one is V diesels in Europe. It's been a great wave for us. It was our start and our ability to prove our technology and to prove the material and gain confidence in the industry. To my knowledge, there are only 2 V diesels in Europe that are not produced in CGI. It's the Mercedes V6 and the Mercedes V8. And those are in aluminum, but the Audi V6 and the Audi V8 made in CGI are actually smaller, lighter, and higher performance. So, it's been a wonderful way to prove the capabilities of CGI in a very successful wave. But we're nearing saturation. And in fairness, I think that the first wave of V diesels in Europe has done as much as we could have asked from it. Yeah? And if we're going to have more growth, potentially from the market ramping up, but we're going to have to look more and more to the other waves in the future. The second wave for commercial vehicles worldwide is quite a different story, because here the penetration is still very low. Even though we've done a great job of launching 17 different commercial vehicle components, we're still less than 10% market penetration. Yeah? And that's only if we think of the market here in the West, where we're active in Europe and North America. If we also include the Chinese market and the Asian markets, we're down below 5%. So there's a fantastic opportunity for growth for CGI in this second wave. And I regard commercial vehicles as being the workhorse of our growth in the near term. V diesels beyond Europe, we mentioned them a little bit earlier. It started with the V6 in Korea for Hyundai, but the real ramp up that we've enjoyed in the last 7 quarters has been on the back of the Ford 6.7 liter V8 for the Ford Super Duty pickup trucks. So that's been a very positive growth for us. And just recently in the media, we have an opportunity for another V diesel beyond Europe. And Ford in Australia has announced that they'll begin sale of a new SUV called the Territory with a 2.7 liter diesel engine. And this is in fact our old Ford 2.7 liter V6 which has been upgraded in Europe and replaced by the 3-liter. But in Australia, they'll continue to use the 2.7. Yeah? So casting in Brazil, manufacturing in England, and vehicle assembly and sale in Australia. And what it means for us is that we'll have both the 2.7-liter V6 and the 3-liter V6 in production going forward. Now, even though we have dropped inline diesels to the 4th wave, it doesn't mean that we give up on them, not at all. The industry continues to demand more performance and better fuel economy from smaller and lighter engines. And so long as that trend exists, it is always helpful for SinterCast and for CGI. I've made a small summary here of the performance development since 1997. And what we see is the peak firing pressure inside of the diesel engine, inside the combustion chamber, and the performance, the specific performance in terms of kilowatts or horsepower per liter. And back in 1997, we had 135 bar of peak firing pressure and 40 kilowatts per liter. And that has progressively increased until today the vehicles are being launched, the diesels, with the 200 bar peak firing pressure and 70 kilowatts per liter. And in fact, our Audi V6, the 3-liter, has been relaunched in a high-power version just last month, and it actually has 77 kilowatts per liter. You know, so this trend is far from over. And I've said in annual meetings before, if we remember the cars that we went on holiday with our parents 20 and 30 and 40 years ago and compare them to what we have today, it's a world of difference. And it isn't stopping today. You know, we'll continue to push for more from less. And that trend will help CGI. And we absolutely see an opportunity for a contribution from inline diesels as we go forward. And likewise for petrol engines. They're doing the same in petrol engines, pushing them harder, making them provide more performance and burn cleaner. There's a lot of discussion in the industry now about downsizing. We're doing gasoline direct injection for the petrol engines, and also turbocharging. And petrol engines are generally built smaller and lighter than diesel engines. And so these are also going to come to their limit. And we absolutely look for a contribution from both inline diesels and petrol engines in the near term. Beyond the core 5 waves, we've always got these 2 other categories, what we call automotive non-block and heads. So these are automotive components other than cylinder blocks and heads, which primarily for us means exhaust manifolds and turbocharger housings, but also more recently the bed plate for the VM Motori V6 diesel. We have a very good contribution from them and a good growth, and also from the industrial power sector. And this means large components, whether it's marine or rail. Recently, we've been a little bit flat in industrial power. The workhorse for us there has been the cylinder head for the General Electric locomotive engines in North America. And locomotive demand in the U.S. in the last 2 years has been cut in half, and it's forecast to stay low for the next few years. So it gives us a steady base, but we have other programs that we're working on and supporting development, and industrial power will grow. It's personally, for me, it's one of my favorite areas that we're working in. So when we look at our breakdown, we have about 55% of our current production for passenger vehicle cylinder blocks, around 30% for commercial vehicle blocks and heads, and about 15% in other components. And our ambition is that while we grow the core car and truck sector, that we also add volume in the industrial power sector so that we maintain this 15% penetration and contribution from industrial power. Right? So with that as a look at the market development for the automotive activities and the production activities, let's look as well at field activities, or rather market development in the foundries. And the first thing to discuss is the recent field activities. We mentioned in the first quarter report that we have a lot of trials in May. Indeed, May was our busiest month ever for trials in the field. Last week we had 3 engineers on trial in different foundries in Asia and 1 in America. This week we have 2 engineers in Asia and 3 in America. And we have some follow-up trials already scheduled for January. So the field activity is increasing, and there's a couple of reasons for this. First, the economy is improving, so the foundries are spending again. And secondly, SinterCast is stronger. And in previous years, when we were traveling and taking equipment to a field trial, we always required at least cost coverage to do the trial. But now that we have a little bit more muscle, and sometimes it's difficult to get people to pay you to do your sales work, we can invest in that development. And certainly conducting a trial is the most powerful sales message we have. You know, it's not brochures and presentations. It's going to the foundry, showing them that the technology works, and showing them the value that it can have for them. The field activities will, of course, lead to new installation opportunities. We made a press release last November where we said that 2011 was shaping up to be our strongest installation year in more than a decade. And our strongest year previously was 2005. In 2005, we agreed or signed contracts for 5 installations, and 4 of them we made. The 5th one was an agreement in late December, and the installation was made the following year. But I think that this should absolutely be the target for us now in 2011. We should try to get back to that 5 that we had hit before, and we should still have the ambition for this to be the strongest installation year in a decade. And of course we have a good start, so I can be a little bit confident. We have the Daedong in January and the Daishin that we announced earlier this week. So 3 more to go, and let's look back on it in December and see how we did. We have always said that as we're able to stand on our own 2 feet and have a profitable business, that will invest the money back into the business, and that means primarily in people to increase our manning and our resources. We've already recruited 2 people to support sales and marketing activities. We still have some ongoing discussions both for commercial recruiting and for technical recruiting. And one of those recruits was Dr. Liu, who becomes our sales director in China. And I say a congratulations to him. He coordinated a seminar in Beijing last week. We invited some of the top cast iron researchers and professors in China. In fact, there was 8 of them. And then there was about 40 senior managers from different cylinder block and head foundries. So he did a wonderful job to pull that seminar together. It gave us an opportunity to tell our story. And much like what Jeff was saying about these thought leaders, in China, these respected researchers and professors, they're the ones who digest the foreign technology. And they not only advise the foundries, but they also advise the state. And so to get them to really understand our technology and to endorse it is an important part of the sales process. So we've had the Beijing seminar last Friday, which, as I said, was very positive and successful. Our next big event after today will be the GIFA. And GIFA is the World Foundry Trade Fair. It's held every 4 years in Dusseldorf, and really everyone from the world comes. That's the one meeting to show products and technology. In the last 2 GIFAs, we have been a guest on the ABP, formerly ABB, but on the ABP stand. And this year, again, we feel that we have the strength and the financial stability to stand on our own. And so we will have a 50 square meter stand to showcase our technology and to host our customers at the GIFA. So after today, it's all hands on deck to prepare for the GIFA. The next thing that I'd like to talk about with regard to the foundry development is what we've referred to internally as our efficiency campaign. For years, we have been developing our technology. The technology is accurate and successful and well received in the market. And we're constantly making small improvements and expanding the functionality. But when we sat together as a group back in January and we discussed what can we do to get to the next level, and we had a very clear consensus among the team that What we have to do next is to make our customers better, make them more efficient, help them save money. And so we've embarked on what we call our efficiency campaign. Historically, every month we provided every customer with a review of their production. So we flag things that we see that they may not, because they don't have time to look through the data like we do. And we feed back to them suggestions. And this year we have changed it to a visual display. And importantly, we not only show them their results, but we also show them the results from our best foundry in every category. So this is a plot, again, from our best foundry in a category of the number of samples taken from each ladle. And ideally, as a pot of iron travels through the foundry, we would just sample it one time and correct it and send it on to pouring. But sometimes things happen, and it's necessary to take additional samples. And so we can show the foundries how many extra samples they're taking. As I say, this is our benchmark because this is our best performer, but all of the other foundries would see a line across 1.02 as the benchmark, and we would challenge them and support them and sometimes push them to try to also get them down to that level of efficiency. The sampling cup is consumed for each analysis, but the thermocouple pair is reused 200 times. So this is our plot for thermocouple efficiency. There should be a preventive replacement after 200 cycles, and we try to show the foundry how well they're performing in terms of thermocouple durability. And this interesting graphic off to the right, this pie chart, showing them what % of their thermocouples are used to the maximum life. And for this foundry in March of 2011, it was 17 out of 18 thermocouples used to full life. And if you think of 200 cycles per thermocouple times 18 thermocouples, it's 3,600 ladles treated in a month. You know, well more than 100 ladles per day. So we're absolutely talking about high volume production. So for all of the other foundries who aren't at peak, they will get their results together with the benchmark line and then another plot showing them how much money they would save if they could be as good as the benchmark foundry. And it's a real eye-opener. And so that's going to be our focus. It may take a bit of a hit on our own margin to do this, but this is how you earn the confidence and the respect and the loyalty of the foundry manager. And it's with that respect and loyalty that you can grow and prosper. So let's not make money now, let's make money tomorrow. So in an outlook for 2011, the series production, we're above our break-even volume, so a really good start. We do think that we'll flatten out a little bit after the middle of the year, but it'll pick up again as new programs come on stream. While the series production may flatten, we're poised to have our best installation year in quite a long time. So we'll have a lot of revenue from the installations which will compensate for that and still give us a very strong financial result. We have new product opportunities, whether it's in the commercial vehicle side or in those fourth and fifth waves now, the inline diesels and the petrol engines hopefully coming into production, also in the industrial power sector. We are increasing our resources, and that will of course increase our costs a little bit, but I think that's a necessary part of growing. We need more hands on deck in order to grow further and faster. I'd also like to acknowledge the machining community. There's been a lot of advances in machining development, both for the machines, the transfer lines or the machining centers, also for the cutters, the inserts, and even the lubricants. So a lot of investment and a lot of work by the machining companies, and that's because they are aware that the CGI is a growing sector, and those with the solutions will be those who benefit from this growth. And that, of course, brings us to the last point, which is the awareness. The entire industry is becoming more aware of CGI. And recently we've also been recognized for some of the good work that's been done. And here we see 2 times we won Casting of the Year honors in 2010, from the Cast Metals Federation in England, the General Motors NASCAR V8, and here in Sweden from the Swedish Foundry Association, the Scania CGI V8. So I hope that you share with me this good progress that we've achieved over the last year. We have active development and positive growth and a very bright outlook. Thank you.